And I said, and you have this new leader, what's your name? And then I pretended not to be able to kind of understand him with that thick foreign accent.
What you kind of do with Miss Ritchfield.
Right. And so then I said, well, what's your name? And then I said, well, how do you spell it? And so then he spells Colin, and I said, oh, that's the problem. See, we would pronounce that colon, And so I kept calling him Colin. And so that saved the freaking day. And that was right out of the gate. That was the first thing.
Right, so
I was fine.
You were fine because you owned the audience.
At that point, I'm fine. I made fun of, and he thought it was hilarious. And people called him Colin for years.
All right, thank you. Russ King is here, everybody. So, Russ, it's funny. I've been coming to Provincetown for, 15 or 20 years. My best friend, Jay, and his husband introduced me to this place. And the first time I saw you, I was obsessed with you. I'm like,
nice.
This guy is awesome. And
how long ago was that?
Mid-2000s.
Oh, nice.
And
wow. That's a long time.
No, it is. And so every time I come here, I'm like, it's Miss Ritchfield. So my wife's like, why are you obsessed with Miss Ritchfield? And so you're like somebody who's inspiring to me, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm a trial lawyer, right? And but I also, sort of an artistic side a little bit. I was a photographer a bit, and I just love how you command this town. Like you go out and you put yourself out there. You have a character, right? Is that the best way to describe your drag? It's a character.
It's a character.
It's a character, and you transform your whole persona, and you take on her, and you never break character.
Rarely,
unless you see somebody once a time I'll catch you say something, but and you stick with it, and it's such an uplifting, fun character, and then the people in town, and you drive through, and it just you just see a wave of joy sweep the town when you go by. I really see that, and so I like that, and so when I started coming here, I've taken my son, who's now almost 10. When he came here when he was 3 or whatever, 3.5, 4, and I said to him, why do you like Provincetown? And he said to me, because here people's hearts are happy.
Oh, that's nice.
And that's like a 4-year-old kid, he's
right.
very, sharp, and they're not burdened by the things, and so that's what I thought. That's why I want to make this an annual tradition for him, because here it's come as you are,
yes,
do your thing, but also your character who comes through here, it embodies that. It's just fun and exciting, and you're coming through town. You're like, oh, who's that? Oh, it's Miss Ritchfield on her scooter or whatever. So I just before we get into it, because I want to learn about you and how drag works, and you're awesome.
Thank you.
I had to fanboy a little bit because you're just so cool.
Without my fans, I am nothing. You have to have fans, or you're not in business.
So Russ, how old are you?
I turned 62 in April.
62. Are you married?
62. I have a partner for 7.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and
right.
I've never had a really significant relationship in my life other than dating,
Have you always lived as a gay man?
Yeah, pretty much. I grew up conservative, and I grew up Protestant, a conservative Protestant church, and did but it was also, my upbringing was also more conservative than the church. The church was conservative, but my family was more conservative.
This is Minnesota?
And this is Minneapolis. Yeah, Ritchfield,
so
actually.
That's a legit thing.
Yeah, Ritchfield is the first-ring suburb, and it was actually the first suburb of Minnesota. So, yes, they have that pride of starting that whole thing. And so it's an interesting suburb. It's a real mix of people, a lot of blue-collar, but a wealthier section, too. And at one point, when my brothers graduated, they graduated with over 1,000 in their class. So it was a big suburb.
And are you an intact family, mother, father?
Yep, mother, father. And and there were 3 older brothers. I was the youngest boy, and my dad was a plumber in the county courthouse. So he was essentially
employee.
Municipal employee, exactly. And he really enjoyed his work, but also worked to retire. That's what you did. You worked for vacation and you worked to retire. And so he retired kind of early because he had heart problems, and then he ended up actually passing away at 70 from heart problems. My mom lived to be 88 and died just before the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
So she literally died January 29th of 2020.
Oh, wow.
So had it been
right
just
before.
a few weeks later, she probably would have died alone. I was able to be there and hold her hand, and And we had a beautiful memorial service. Relatives came in from Chicago. So none of that would have happened had she died just a few weeks later.
And so did she stay at home, like stay-at-home mother?
She was a stay-at-home mom,
Isn't that amazing? You could raise a family of 6 on a plumber's salary?
And and it was a small home. It was a 700 square foot house.
Wow.
But all the houses were that way. All my friends lived in small houses. And actually our family, we had four boys and mom and dad, so there were 6 of us. And but there were families bigger than ours in houses that were that size.
Wow. So you're like as working class as it gets.
Yes, absolutely. And then the character, Miss Ritchfield, is an homage to my mom. I never really knew that. I created the character for fun. We can talk about the origins of it. But the gist of it is, my friends came first and were like, "Oh my God, that's your mother." And I was like, "Really?" And I've heard this from other guys too. Create characters is oftentimes, frequently, it's the woman you know the best, and that's your mom.
And your first love.
Yeah, and your first love. And so it was super funny and then my brothers saw it and they were like, "Yeah, that's my mother. That's your mom." And then my mom saw it and she started coming to shows on a regular basis for many, many years and loved it and never realized it. She never caught on.
You never said anything to her.
Never said
Mom,
anything
this
to
is
her.
you.
Never. And never. The only thing I ever said to her is I said, sometimes I use things you say. That funny things you said when I was a kid in the show. And she said, "Well, really? Well, like what?" And one of the things she used to say, she had a lot of funny things because she was very sanguine. And so there was nothing left unsaid in our household. Anything that came to mind was spoken of.
No filter.
Right, no filter. My dad, totally the opposite. My dad was very well thought out and didn't speak unless he had something to say. And my mother was the complete opposite, of course, And so one of the things she used to say is like she couldn't eat like raw onions, for instance, because they would, disagree with her. But she'd say, "Yeah, I can't have raw onions. I'll run like a faucet," was what she used to say. And I said that to her. I said, like when you used to say, "I can't eat raw onions, I run like a faucet." I never said that. I would never say anything, so she completely, "You're making that up. You heard that someplace else." And so, and she also used to say to us when we were kids, "You must be 2 people. One person couldn't be that stupid. What's wrong with you? Why do you embarrass us?" So she was just funny. She had a lot of funny things. And we knew, she loved us and didn't mean anything seriously. But she would really kind of let you have it if something went wrong,
And so
she was funny.
So 3 older brothers.
3 older brothers.
Are they still around?
Yeah. And the oldest brother's very alienated from the family. On his own, on his own
How
doing.
about the other 2? Are you close with them?
Yeah, and we all still get together. So,
are you the only gay one in the family?
Yeah, as far as I know, yeah.
No, but and the only one that does drag.
Yes, and the only one. But we were a singing family. My parents were musical, but didn't practice music, but they could sing. They enjoyed music.
Okay.
My brother, my next oldest brother to me, was in a singing group at one point, and then they traveled a little bit. And then my other brother, above that, him has a son, and he's he is disabled. He's like about a 5-year-old kid. He's really sweet. And they sing together. He and his wife and this kid, who, by the way, has perfect pitch. He's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, he's one of these, they don't know what exactly he has, but he's blind and essentially like a 5-year-old kid and just sweet as can be and has perfect pitch. So they don't bring a pitch pipe. She just says, "Give us a G," and he knows a G. It's amazing. It's just amazing. So anyway, so we are a musical family, but...
So then how did you, what was your first exposure to the arts?
Well, church was the first exposure
Protestant
to the arts.
church?
Yeah, Protestant church.
Which denomination of Protestant?
It was a General Baptist.
General Baptist.
Yeah,
Wow,
General Baptist. Yeah, so it was kind of middle of the road. Like, they weren't super conservative, and actually...
Where were they with the gays then?
Oh, well, like everybody else was.
Well, but the Episcopalians were always sort of, like the joke was the Catholics have guilt and the Episcopalians have parties,
Yeah, right. No, not then even. This was like, in the 60s and early 70s.
Everyone's in the closet.
Everybody's in the closet.
Right.
Everybody is, not, the churches weren't, nobody was accepting at that point. I mean, I suppose the Unitarians probably were.
Yeah.
Because they're not creed-based.
Right.
And I had a friend who was Unitarian.
They take everyone.
Yeah, and they were like, it's very open and accepting, but... that
Still
is
then no good.
Otherwise, everybody was against it. But the church, fortunately, was what they call Calvinist, and so the theology is that God chooses you, you don't choose God. So, in other words, nothing you do merits the love of God. God loves you because of who you are. Now, even though they taught gay was wrong, that message still hit me that, okay, God loves me for who I am, not for what I do. My deed, in other words, your good works are not saving you per se. God saves you. And so it was actually a good, it was opposite of like Catholics and stuff who are all about, and a lot of Protestants who are all about behavior. This was not the case. Now, they also were against gays, so he did have to grow up with that.
The priests were all secretly gay.
But yeah, right. And so our pastors and stuff, and, of course, Protestants, they were all married and had families and what have you. And like in our church, like everybody went to movies and danced and all that stuff. Our family didn't, because our family was super conservative, because my father was conservative. But the church we went to was pretty actually good for me, because it was fun. It was huge. And so it had a big youth group. So we had a lot of fun. And so there was always something going on every weekend. That youth group would do something, especially in high school. And it just kind of kept me out of trouble, I think, mostly, because it kept me in with a group of people that didn't use drugs and really didn't drink, per se. And it was just a good, so I think it kept me out of trouble, which was fortunate, because the whole HIV and AIDS thing hit when I graduated from high school. I mean, that was already in the pipeline. And so had I been, out and about too much at that time, and I was from about the age of 16, I was sexually active in what they call tea rooms, which are department store bathrooms and stuff like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so I had friends that worked in department stores and were like, oh yeah, this stuff is going on. And so I was like, I was there like the next day. So I did it. I was doing that.
The next day?
Yeah. I mean, I was like there.
Well, I could see you're 16, you're all charged up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I could ride my bike, or I could drive at the time, so I would drive to and it was close. The very first mall is proudly in Ritchfield, and the first Target was in Ritchfield. So, Ritchfield's famous.
Oh, yeah.
So Southdale was the first indoor mall in the country. Because of the weather, they created this indoor shopping experience.
And you christened the bathroom.
And I christened the bathroom. So I was doing that kind of stuff.
And so wait, can I back you up 1 second? So when did you, because I asked Dave about this too, was there a point before you were 16 where you said, I'm different, I'm attracted to men?
And for a long time I wondered if I wanted to be a woman, because it was like, I knew I liked guys. It was like, oh, well, maybe I was supposed to be a girl,
Oh, I see.
And so it was very confusing to me, and I was very in touch with it. I was aware of it.
When, what age, you think?
Oh, like 5,
wow.
6. Oh my gosh, easily, yeah.
Did you ever dress up like a woman when you were younger?
And I would do that kind of stuff too, which isn't terribly unusual.
I mean, a lot of
right, or whatever, kids will do that. But I did it too as a kid, and I just remember it was okay when you were little, and it wasn't okay when you got older.
That's right.
Like then it's not okay. So it was like an interesting experience growing up there. But I came to understand myself after college.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to a Bible college first.
My gosh.
Oh yes, which again probably saved my life.
Really?
Probably saved my life. Not in the theological sense, but in the physical sense, because when I graduated in high school was 1981.
Oh, right. I mean,
and I was, and that was the first June of 1981 is when the first article came out about AIDS. So it was starting to circulate at that point, and they didn't realize then how many people were already infected with the disease, you know what I mean? So it took a while for that to kind of catch up. And within, a year, it was tons of people. It was a mess. And there was no federal response. And I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. It was terrible. But for me, had I been at a university, God only knows, you know what I mean? And some of my friends who were because then I went there for a couple of years, and then I transferred to Bemidji State University, and that's like 4 hours north of the Twin Cities, and there were people with AIDS there in 1983, 84. There were already people living there with AIDS. So that's how quickly it spread. And a friend of mine from a very rural area, northern Minnesota, I remember, he was HIV positive, he had AIDS. And it was just like, wow, it was shocking. And he had been with some guys in town who lived in Bemidji who didn't go to school there. And they probably traveled. They probably had young gay guys probably went to New York, Chicago, places like that.
And they were spreading it, and nobody knew.
Nobody knew. And so I think the Bible school thing helped me in a major way.
Because it isolated you, because it guilted you?
And both. Because we weren't supposed to be sexually active unless you're married. It was that whole concept. And then there wasn't gay, of course. That wasn't acceptable. But regardless, I think had I been in a situation where I could have just gone out and done anything, I think I probably would have done it. I probably would have resolved that in my mind, and I did in college. I was more sexually active in college, still not really out. And guys my age who are like in their early 60s, all of us came out when we were like 25 and 26. I don't know what happened, but we all came out at the same time.
How did that happen? Did you go tell your mom and dad?
I was working on the Canadian border after college because I was already in northern Minnesota. And so I took it was a small daily in International Falls. And International Falls, Minnesota is very famous because it was the icebox of the nation, the coldest spot in the continental United States. And so it was actually a lot of people back then knew. Because, if you ever watched TV and you saw a Sears Die Hard battery commercial and they said, we parked this car.
It would say International Falls.
Yeah, it would say International Falls. And literally, the hotels in the winter, in the summertime, it was a big hunting and fishing and gorgeous area and beautiful recreational area, camping, houseboats. I mean, it was a gorgeous area. It's the Boundary Waters. It's beautiful. And so during the summertime, it would be the hotels would be filled with that. And in the wintertime, the hotels would be completely filled with cold weather tusters. So it was an interesting place to be a reporter. I thought it was interesting.
So you were a reporter?
Yeah, I worked in a newspaper. Yeah, that was my background, journalism.
Like just a beat reporter?
But, yep, just a beat reporter. And then it was small. I mean, it was a daily, but it was a small daily. So there's only like 5 reporters.
Right.
So and we had to take our own pictures and stuff like that. We didn't have photographers.
It's like the patch, like the now the patch.
It's real. It's the real thing. And then after that, I was screwing around up there a little bit. And I just felt like, this just... I don't want to live like this anymore. And I had come to Jesus with myself and Jesus, it was like, okay, like I'm willing to be straight. It doesn't bother me. I think women are beautiful. And I think...
You've been with women before?
Never. I've not been with women.
But you were willing to entertain it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think women are beautiful, and I think and I've always said this, if I lived in an Islamic country or something where there was no option, I would be married and have children. I would totally be married and have children because I could do that, But it's just not really where my heart is. It's not being honest with a woman, because that isn't really ultimately what I want. And I would see these guys screw up these women's lives by marrying them. And then later, and they were screwing around on the side or they'd end up divorced or whatever. And I thought, I don't want to do that to somebody. And so I just, and I was old enough, I was done with college and I was working and I was old enough to have a sensible conversation with myself about this. And I just said, I don't want to do this. And so what I did is I went home and I was also dealing with just my sexual behavior because I was just like doing all this underground sex stuff.
But can it was before you get to this, I want to hear the story. But how did it happen then? Because now obviously you have Grindr, you have all these days.
Then?
Like, what do you have to walk by and catch someone's eye?
That can be it. It can be that. It can be parts of town.
Cruising
it can
areas
be
that
cruising
you
areas.
You have to learn that from somebody.
Yeah, and a guy looks at you and you look at him and you like whatever. Then if you get connected to somebody, then you'll hear about somebody else.
There's a party,
you know what I mean?
Because there's where gay men go.
Yeah, or just like, I've been with that guy or whatever. Or there will be rumors that that guy. And so he's a piano teacher. He's in the more traditional gay
You had
work.
to work at it then though.
Oh my
Because now
word.
literally my friends they have this app and it's buzzing.
Oh yeah, constantly.
2 seconds, you get it. Like you don't know how bad it was.
It's too bad. It's just too bad though because then after I did come out, then I started going to the bars and stuff like that, and that was really fun because that was open and everyone talked and and then you meet people but I started coming out. It was interesting. The story's great, actually. It's a great coming out story that I always tell whenever I have a chance, is that I was picking a guy up for sex, right? And he's just in a gay part of town. I was kind of cruising around. He looked at me, I looked at him. He's just walking, right? So I was like, so I sort of slowed down, and rolled down the window and say, hey, how's it going? He goes, great, and be like, hey, you want to go someplace? Sure, boom, he's in the car. We're at a park. On the way home from the park, right, and really nice guy. And we remained friends till he died many, many years later from AIDS, sadly. And he said, do you ever go to church? And I said, I grew up in church, but I haven't been in church in, I'd gone to church since I don't know when. And he said, I go to this gay church in town, and it's really great. You should consider, it's just a lot of fun people. And, of course, I liked him, so I had no inclination to go to church necessarily, but I wanted to meet him again, So I ended up going to this church, and it was so good. It was such a great church. It was very non-denominational. So there were people from all these different backgrounds, but there were also straight people that went who had gay kids or friends of gay people that liked it. Very mixed men and women. great pastor she was very dynamic lesbian who spoke, and it was just a great thing. And so I got involved there. And then just became friends with this guy. Then we just became fast friends. Like, I would stay at his house because I lived out of town. And so on Saturday nights, I'd stay at his house. I'd come into town, and we went to different bars. I'd country western dance because that was a big thing in like the early 90s. And he would go to the disco and whatever. And then we'd meet up at his house, and I'd stay overnight just platonically. And then we'd go to church the next morning. Yeah, because he didn't have a car at the time. And so we'd go to church, and then, I'd drop him off, and I'd head back because I lived about an hour out of the cities. So anyway, so it's a great coming out story. And then what happened, and why it was, again, so great, and where, like, the church has a history in my coming out and my story so much is, like, I think that Bible school saved my life by keeping me from running around. And then this church actually introduced me to all these fun gay people in a really clean way that, the bars are fine, but like, I'm a recovering alcoholic now.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I've been recovering for like 15 years, right? So, and that's in my family too. Alcoholism on my mom's side. Everybody's an alcoholic or drug addict, right? Or mentally ill, it's a fragile side of the family. But anyway, and not many in recovery yet. A lot of them died from that, so it was sad, yeah. But the long and short of it is that at the church they said, it was just the beginning of the AIDS thing. It was like 88 or 89. I went to this church, and they said, we need volunteers at Grace House, which is the first AIDS hospice. And I thought, you know what? I've been healthy. I somehow managed to keep my health through the beginning of like a crazy time in my life, and I'm going to do this out of gratitude for being healthy. And it was amazing. I volunteered, and this AIDS hospice was set up, and it was small. It was a very, very, very small hospice because they all had to be under. There was no hospice. There was no structure for hospice. This is new. Like, they didn't have hospices before AIDS. And what happened is they had to put it under adult foster care. So they were under all the hospices laws of adult foster care. So there could only be 4 beds. So there was only 4 beds in this hospice. And but it was amazing to work there. And what I would do is every Wednesday night, I would show up at 5. And then the executive director and a nurse who were on during the day would leave, and then you would run it until 10 o'clock at night. So you'd be there for dinner, you'd be there to put people to bed, to give them the medications and all that. Plus, like, I had a key to the, you gave out all the meds. I mean, stuff that would never happen today. But at the time, times were so bad, and people were dying so fast. I would only go once a week. It would be every Wednesday evening and I did it for 4 or 5 years, from 5 to 10. I would get there the next week, and a bed would be empty. It'd be like, oh, Tim died. And they'd be like, yeah, Tim died. A woman came in, she died, and this is another guy. I mean, that's how fast people were going through that place. And then some of them you got to know, because some of them were there for a while, but it was a drastic time. And to be part of that is really, I mean, at the time, it just seemed like the thing to do. I didn't even really think about it. And now I look back on it, and I think, wow, like, I was part of something really important.
And where was that located?
In Minneapolis.
Minneapolis.
And it was the first one. There turned out to be, God, there's probably 8 or 9 of them in the Twin Cities during the real height of it. And then as it's, I think 1987 is when protease inhibitors came in. And then that dropped in 1 year, the fatality rate dropped 44%.
But by working there, do you think it made you be more careful?
It did, and that was it did and it didn't. I mean, because of my obsessive personality and, like, dealing with my alcoholism, if you're an alcoholic or you're an addictive person, it touches every area of your life. It doesn't just touch, alcohol. I mean, that's why it's good to be in a program, because you're dealing with the addiction rather than, like, a lot of people quit drinking, but then they just work all the time, or they have sex, or they gamble, or whatever, and so you do kind of have to, and that's why a program is a good idea, whether it's AA or whatever kind of program, but something that's really going to get to the core of what's going on. And that was really helpful for me. And my sexual activity then was the same way. I was just I would be obsessive, right? I would just go to great lengths. And so it's great to understand that. It's great to get to the bottom of it and deal with it. And I still deal with it today on a much healthier level. Yeah.
So when you go home, do you sit mom down and dad down and say, I'm gay?
I did.
I want to hear that.
Well, my mom and I sort of talked, and she knew. Yeah, I sort of talked. She had found something. It was like one of those deals.
Yeah.
And so, but my dad, I think, my dad just said, yeah, I figured, and he was
Did he
pissed.
did he tell you he loved you?
Oh, God, no. He told me he didn't want me in the house, and he didn't want me around my nieces and nephews. So, but I always share this story. I think it's very important to share, is that I was very good about, and I don't know why, I guess because I was older, and I had worked for a few years, and I had a level of, kind of understanding and compassion, is that I thought, okay, this took me years to come to terms with. I can't tell my parents one day and expect them to just understand it. You need to give them a chance to come out.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I did, because they have to deal with it too, just like you do. And
Right.
even though there's an assumption of it, the confirmation of it, is different. It's one thing to know something, it's another thing to confirm it and to have it be real and declared.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's a whole nother situation.
Right.
And going back to alcoholism, same thing. When you say I'm an alcoholic, there's a difference in your life when you can admit that and you can deal with it. And with the gay thing, it's like my parents had to just have time to figure it out, because they're conservative, and I think they're embarrassed and frustrated that it happened. It happened, and what did they do, or whatever, or where did we go wrong? And so I stayed in touch. My dad didn't want to have any contact with me, and I stayed in touch, and I just acted like nothing had happened. And we did go to a counseling thing at one point, and the counselor essentially said, you're going to have to draw a line here and draw boundaries. And so we did. We just draw boundaries. And I was like, I just won't talk about it, which I don't need to talk about it with you. It doesn't really involve you, per se.
No, right.
And so, get this. So within a year of that, with me persistently coming to birthday parties and our family got together quite a bit when my mom was still alive. She would always have parties and what have you. So we were always I would say once or twice a month we were getting together at somebody's birthday. And so I just hung in there and kept going, and whether I was invited or not. And within a year, 1 year, 12 months, right? My dad and mom came over to my boyfriend's house for Christmas.
And that was it?
Yeah, they came over for Christmas.
When he came over, how good did that feel?
Great. And it was nice because he was from Michigan and he couldn't go home. And so during the holidays, and we had on and off years where my brothers had, so it was an off year where my brothers were with their in-laws because they were all married. And so it would just be my mom and dad and I at Christmas, actually on the holiday. And since my boyfriend couldn't go home, he was going to be by himself, and he said, well, why don't we have your parents over for dinner? And he cooked. He was a really good cook. So yeah, they came over. My mom brought him a gift, and
that was it.
Totally fine. And then the next year or 2 years, my aunt came with them, who was visiting from San Diego, and she came over too, and he played the piano, and after dinner he sat down and played the piano for them,
and after that he was.
Yeah, and then my dad was fine. He didn't ever see me perform, but I didn't start performing till '96, really.
So So you at some point, how do you decide that you're going to be you do stand up? I mean, because and let's talk a little about your act, because your act. What I love about it is, it's not just like a typical drag show where you go up there and somebody sings 5 songs, they cover Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston, all that, and that's a certain type of drag.
Right,
and there's a place for that. You do crowd work.
Yeah, a lot of times I do crowd work.
Because crowd work is, I don't know, I follow on my Instagram a lot of comedians. I love live comedy.
Yeah,
and crowd work to me is the hardest work, because you can't have a script. You got to take people where they are, and you got to work with them.
And it can be a clinker. You can
die or you can kill.
And you can die or you can kill, and you can also, and it's hard to know when to cut and run and when to stay with something. And I still make mistakes at that.
But did you start as a live comic?
No, what I started with is I was working with the AIDS Project. So I volunteered at this AIDS hospice for about 4.5 years. And then I actually worked as the communications director for the Minnesota AIDS Project, which is a statewide organization. I did that for 5 years, and then did the newsletter for I stopped doing direct care for the hospice because it was just too much AIDS. And so what I did is once I started working full time, then I said, I'll do your newsletter. So I did their newsletter for years. And so I still in touch with them, but I worked in AIDS professionally as communications director for 5 years. And I did, and we were, I think I was about halfway through my tenure there. And we needed a drag queen for a parade. And believe it or not, like nobody really did drag.
90s?
Yeah, this would have been, because I worked from 93 to 98.
Okay.
So it would have been like 94, 95, and there was just kind of nobody. But it must have been 90, because I started doing it in 95 for fun. So it must have been 94, and there was just nobody on staff. And we had like 60 people. So nobody on staff. And I said, I've always wanted to see what I'd look like. I think it'd be fun. So I'll do it. So, because we wanted to go through this parade with all the different aspects of drag, So we had leather people, and we had bears, and we had lesbians on, bikes, and we had all this stuff because we wanted to represent, AIDS represent, our project represents everyone. And so then I got dressed up in drag, and then I did that.
Who guided you?
I just went to a friend who did, actually a friend of our family's did makeup at Estee Lauder. And so I said, can you just do my makeup? And she's like, yeah, I can do your makeup. So she did it. And then...
what was the name of your character then?
Well, there was no character at the time.
You were just a woman in
I was just like, I was just kind of like dressed up and went through the parade. And then I did a thing at work for the AIDS Project employees, and because of the seriousness of what we did, we had a fun committee, and I was on the fun committee because it's like it's like you're dealing with some pretty serious stuff, so you need some levity, and so we had a party, and we did this party on because we'd moved out of one hellacious building in the hood where the ceiling fell down on part of the staff, and it was just a disaster. So my executive director's like, we've got to move. So we moved to this other building, which had horrible carpeting, and so we had to take all the carpeting up, and in the process of doing all this, it was a lot of staff upheaval. So as a gift to the staff, when we got it all done, we had a big party, just to say thank you for all your work, and some of the staff people helped move furniture, and and you're like officing in a hallway for a couple weeks, and all this stuff, and they were so good. And so I took the old carpeting, this old crappy carpeting, and I cut out shapes, stars and triangles and circles, and I made keychains for everyone out of the old carpeting, and then I came in drag as Carpetina and handed all the staff members their keychains, which are made with this disgusting old carpeting, which I'm sure they all threw away. But it was just a fun time, and so that was like another time. And then finally, I went to a Miss America party, and that's where Miss Ritchfield was born. And because I went with a friend of mine to this fancy, we had this guy who was officer at General Mills, and his partner worked in ad sale, he was an ad executive, so they made a lot of money, and they had a beautiful new home in a beautiful neighborhood of the cities, and Minneapolis is known for lakes, so it was right off of this lake. I mean, super expensive. And so this was their first party that they were going to do, and it was a Miss America party, and they had done this for years in their various apartments, but there were only like 10 of us. So I said to my roommate, let's go in drag. That would just be funny in this neighborhood to show up in drag, right? And show the neighbors, who moved in. Yeah. And so we clump, and he was Miss Little Rock 1986, and I was Miss Ritchfield 1981.
And what's 1981?
The year I graduated from high school.
Oh, okay.
And I graduated a little bit old. I was actually started school later because my brother started younger and had a tough time. So my mom.
You were like 6 in kindergarten.
Yeah, right. At the end of kindergarten, I was 6. Yeah, and so that's why it's 81 instead of 80. But anyway, so we get to the door of this really fancy house, really beautiful, and we're standing there, kind of feeling a little awkward. I'd never done, by myself like this, and so we're standing there kind of giggling, and this guy answers the door, who we don't know. Like, this guy comes to the door, and we're like, oh my God, who are you? And I'm thinking, it's this house. I know it's this house, So then I said, is Mark home? And he goes, oh yeah, he's inside. So we come inside, and up this open staircase comes my friend with another couple people I don't know. And it's like, what is going on? Because it was always like 10 gay guys that would watch the Miss America pageant and do this. And so anyway, he introduces us. It's somebody from work and somebody from Clark's work. And I'm like, why are these people here? And he goes, it's a housewarming. Didn't you know? And I was like, no, we didn't know. Do you want us to go home? Because we're standing there in drag, and it's not even good drag. And he's like, no, everyone knows we're gay. You can come in. And he was like a vice president then, and he was a president later. Wow. I mean, he was way up there. And nice guy, really nice guy. He said, no, come on in. And so Miss Ritchfield was kind of born at that party.
And you went as Miss Ritchfield?
Yeah, with the because we were as a Miss America party, we had to have a title.
You still have it?
I don't think I still have that original. Isn't that funny? I know. I don't think for years I saved it.
Do you remember moment? Like, was it your friend who did Miss Little Rock, and then you were like, well, I'll just be Miss Ritchfield?
No, it was me that started it because, well, actually the name, I should give credit to this guy who worked with us at the AIDS Project. He worked in development, I worked in communication, so we worked a lot together on events. And he lived in an affluent suburb right next to us, and they were our nemesis. We hated them and they hated us.
Right.
And then he said, some meetings he'd say, well, why don't you ask Miss Ritchfield what she thinks? And so he would refer to me as Miss Ritchfield.
So
then, he was at this party.
In like a bitchy kind of way.
Yeah, well, why don't you ask Miss Ritchfield
what she thinks?
What she thinks, And so and everyone would laugh, and Edina was the town that was, we called them cake eaters. And it was super funny. And he said, oh, we were afraid to go to football games in Ritchfield because we were afraid we were going to get beat up. It was like, oh my God, because it was so blue collar, so different for them. But anyway, so he actually kind of, I think, planted the seed. And then another woman at the AIDS Project saw pictures of this party and said, you should perform. Have you ever thought of performing? You seem like you'd have a good personality for that. And I thought, oh yeah, I performed in high school. Like, I was the lead in the high school musicals.
Oh, so you had a theater background.
I did have a theater background. But then when I went to college, I needed to make money. I put myself through school, and I worked in audiovisual. So I learned all the behind-the-scenes stuff. So I ran soundboards and light boards and all that stuff. So I know all the technical parts of theater, too.
Did you see shows? Like as a kid? Or
No.
You didn't have the money, right?
No, we didn't have the money, and we didn't go to theater.
When did you start seeing theater?
I started seeing theater in late high school.
Okay.
I think the very first show I saw
yeah.
was Camelot with Richard Harris,
Oh, wow.
and it was back when the stars used to travel with. Now they don't do that so much
Yeah, they
anymore.
have different shows. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're seeing a touring company, you're generally not seeing super famous people, but Richard Harris, and then I saw Carol Channing do Hello Dolly, and she used to tour with that. Yeah, so it came through the Twin Cities. So I saw both of those when I was younger, and it left a great impression on me. I mean, when the orchestra started and that curtain opened for Camelot, it was like, wow. It was like a movie, but it was real people.
Oh, it's incredible.
There's just something about it that you just never
my son
experienced
Rex,
it.
He's 10 and almost 10. He's been to 85 shows. We go
I would
every
love
week.
that.
Like we have tickets Sunday for Funny Girl, the Streisand one.
Oh,
But he's been to Les Mis 7 times, Hamilton 10 times, and he's 9.
Oh,
I
my
didn't see 85
God.
shows.
No.
I saw 5 shows by the time I was in college, maybe, because someone gave me tickets to Les Mis or something.
Me too.
So you had all that, and so you started performing. So when's the first time you was it at that parade or?
The first time I actually performed then is I got jilted by a boyfriend who I'd only dated like 3 or 4 times. It wasn't any big deal, but he quit calling. It's one of these situations. He kind of ghosted me. At the time, there wasn't even such a thing, but he just wouldn't take my calls. So I was like, I was bummed, and then Country Western was winding down, so that was kind of ending, and I was like kind of feeling bummed. And my roommate said, the guy that went to that party with me said, why don't we go to the drag show? I hated drag. I was like, I thought it was a bad representation of gay men, and it's like, that's what they show on the news all the time with the parades and all this stuff, and the rest of us are at the parade too, but they don't take our pictures. And so he said, well, you've been thinking about it, and you've that crazy character that, we created. Why don't we go down? And so then I went down, had a few drinks, got some liquid courage in me, and that night I went into the dressing room and just said, I have an act and I would like to perform here. And this was the premier drag place in the Twin Cities, and the drag queen said, well, do you have a tape of your performance? And I said, no, not really. Right, exactly. And I mean, it was so not a big deal, right? Anybody could really perform there. But she wanted, she had standards, and I respect that. So I knew a couple people that worked there at the bar, and they said, well, these people have seen me, and they kind of vouched for me. Yeah, and they hadn't seen me, but they were like, yeah. So she's like, okay, you can do a fundraiser on Wednesday. Now, this is like a week from Wednesday. This is like 10 days from this thing. I don't have an act. I don't have anything. I have nothing.
Right.
I have like a bathing suit that I wore to that party. And that was it. And the other thing in the parade was rented. I didn't even own that. Just rented a dress. So I like panicked. I was like, what am I going to do? And so you had to have 3 numbers. and 3 outfits, and it's like, oh my gosh. So I put her into high gear, and I started I did No Strings on Me from, an old version from like the 50s, and it wasn't Doris Day, it was somebody else, but somebody that sounded like that. So that was really funny, and I jump roped, and then I did I'm Just a Girl Who Can't Say No, only because I had been in Oklahoma as a kid and I knew the song and I needed another song. Then I did LOVE for the first time, that I always end my shows with.
Oh, yeah.
Every time. That's my song. And the very first time I performed, I did it, and I had a big ball gown. And then I used to stand on my head until I injured my neck. I don't stand on my head anymore. I stood on my head until like 2008, But so I would stand on I would spell it with my arms, and then I would stand on my head and spell it with my legs. Well, it was hilarious with the ball gown, because the ball gown fell, and the crinoline fell, and it was just a very dramatic thing. And then it just really, I remember I was having a business lunch the next day in downtown, and a guy walked by who we knew, who was a organizer in town, and he looked and saw us in the window, and he stopped and he turned around and came into the restaurant, and he said, I heard about last night. He said, that's going around town. He goes, you're going to have to do that again. I missed that, and I remember thinking, and I said to and I was out with gay guys. It was a business lunch, but it was other gay men.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, that's interesting. And they were like, yeah, that's a good sign that people are talking about it, at the gym.
And that's before the internet. Like that's,
and that was just like the next day, and this was like lunch the next day. And this guy had been working out in the morning, and somebody had been talking about it already. So I was like, well. So then I started to MC shows. And the emceeing of shows gave the entertainer a voice, because I couldn't sing live at that venue because it didn't have the system to really sing live.
Right.
It was like a dance club. So I started talking, and ended up working there for just about 6 months, and then I left, and I was drinking too much, and a friend of mine said, "You're drunk at the end of the show, and that doesn't work for the perform. It just doesn't work for your character. A, she shouldn't drink at all, and B, she should certainly not be drunk." And he goes, "You're going to ruin that character. You got to leave." So, left and immediately made plans at this really cool, really cool little cabaret, 99-seat cabaret in a really fun part of town, and got in there for a show in February that I had no idea. I was like, oh, I have this show I want to bring to this, and I bullshitted my way in. And the guy's like, oh, okay, well, we'll give you a 7 o'clock slots, or 7:30 or 8 o'clock, whatever it was. So there was a show before us and a show after us. And they ran that place, and it was connected to a bowling alley. So it was,
God.
And it had been built in 1929 and never touched. So it's the really old bowling alley, this old beautiful bar, and then next to it was part of a just like a city group of buildings, and it was a little storefront, and they had knocked through and built a games room, and it had been a really tough bar for many, many years. And then this lesbian bought it and cleaned it up and got rid of the games and put a theater in there. So when you're talking and you're doing your show, you could hear people bowling, which was so perfect for Miss Ritchfield.
You're like, strike!
Perfect. And now they've put soundproofing in. Now they've much upgraded the thing, but it was very funny.
So you're then having, how long is the show? How about you doing an hour then?
I was doing an hour, but I did it with friends.
Okay, because an hour is a long show. How is your show now? An hour, right?
An hour. It's actually over an hour. It should be an hour, but
it's a lot of material.
It's a lot of material, and we did it as a Christian radio broadcast. So I had a guy who's a little Italian guy, real handsome guy, and he was always in a tuxedo. He was the announcer. Then a little Jewish woman that played the piano for me, and then these 2 tall drag queens. And so it was this funny group of us, and we would do a production number. The 5 of us, we'd do production number with choreography.
Oh, that's hilarious!
And it was hilarious to watch because there was all these different sizes of people, and it just created a really, really fun atmosphere. And the newspaper wrote about it. It caught on immediately with the general public. And so immediately people, it just sold out. The first run I did was only Fridays and Saturdays at this specific time. And it sold out before it started practically.
But you can't pay your rent with this now, right?
I was still working.
You still had a 9 to 5, right?
Still 9 to 5. And that was about 96, and in 98 I quit my job.
And then it's full on Ritchfield.
And no, it was 5 years of struggling, and I did temp work. and I did whatever I could do.
But you were focusing on that, but you were just doing other stuff.
I was trying to be a freelance writer, which worked in 98. 99, the .com crash hit, and we all lost our contracts. I was working for Sidewalk.com that Microsoft had.
Oh, yeah.
And they kicked that to the curb, and somebody else bought it, and then so you got paid these reasonable salaries, actually good salaries, to write these columns and so forth. Well, then it was like, we'll give you $25 for that, and it's like, and you'd gotten paid like $250 before. You could write 3 or 4 of those in a week, and you could do okay. Yeah. It's like, I can't make any money on $25 a column. So then that was the end of that. And that's when I started doing temp work. I did it. And then finally what happened is every year I would try to get into Provincetown because...
When's your first time you came to Provincetown?
Well, I'd heard about it early on in my performing because people knew Varla Jean Merman. Friends of mine knew her and had come out here for vacation. Like, oh, it's such a great place. Miss Ritchfield should go out there. And I started looking into it and I thought, oh, that would be great. Yeah. And so I'm starting to travel in 1999 with Atlantis Events, which is a gay and lesbian travel company. And that really put me on the map because that was people from all over the country and in some cases all over the world. We traveled all over the place. Didn't do a ton. We did like 2 resorts and 2 cruises. So it wasn't a ton of travel, but some. And so I was thinking I should be able to get into Provincetown. Couldn't get in. 4 summers, and every summer I would tell my temp job I might have to leave, I might not be able to be here, and of course then it would fall through and I would be there. And I had friends that worked out here and we could not get me in. And so finally I did an event for Norwegian Cruise Line because that's the cruise line Atlantis Events used. And so the staff people knew me and said, oh, we want you to be at this big sales event. So I come to this big sales event, right? There's like 250 salespeople that they have, and I was going to do a show, and they said, oh, yeah, there's no room. It's on a little yacht. We don't have room for a show, so you're just going to have to do stand-up. Well, I'd never done stand-up in my life. I'd done these shows, where they sort of, you have a story.
Yeah.
Well, this, I'm like, stand-up? Like, holy crap, I don't have material,
You start writing.
So I'm like, holy smokes. And he goes, yeah, just pick out your favorite outfit and, do like 5 minutes before dinner and then 5 minutes between the salad and then 5 minutes for dessert. And I'm just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I almost just pulled back and just said, I can't do that. I'm not trained for that. And then I thought, what's the worst thing that can happen? I can fail. And so I thought, what, I'm just going to have to put my best foot forward. And the first thing that happened, it was so classic, because the first thing that happened is they had a new CEO, and his name was Colin, and he was from England. So he had an English accent, so I chatted, young guy, really nice guy. And so I chatted with him immediately, like, oh, and it's an honor to be here, and I've traveled with Norwegian Cruise Line for years, and because this was in like 2002. And I said, and you have this new leader, what's your name? And then I pretended not to be able to kind of understand him with that thick foreign accent.
What you kind of do with Miss Ritchfield.
Right. Like, And so then I said, well, what's your name? And then I said, well, how do you spell it? And so then he spells Colin, and I said, oh, that's the problem. See, we would pronounce that colon, And so I kept calling him Colin. And so that, saved the freaking day. And that was right out of the gate. That was the first thing.
Right, so
then I was fine.
You were fine because you owned the audience.
At that point, I'm fine. I made fun of it, and he thought it was hilarious. And people called him Colin for years. And, so that worked out. And then I'm going around. I always tell this story, too, because I think it's such a great story for performers or for anyone, really. And they pointed me, and I talked to people because I didn't have any friggin' material. So I'm talking to people, trying to make jokes, whatever. So they say, go talk to that woman, Donna, over there. And she is the top salesperson. And everyone, quote unquote, hates her, because she always makes her goal and all that stuff. Right. So I go to talk to her. Well, she's from here. She's from the Cape. I didn't know that.
Right.
And people here are, kind of stoic and,
New Englanders.
The New Englanders, the Yankees, they oftentimes
they're progressive people, but they're very conservative in other ways.
And some are cold, when you just meet them, very warm people, but not necessarily come across as warm. And she was like ice, she wanted nothing to do with this, or at least it seemed that way to me. Maybe she was fine, but she seemed very cold and sort of distant and kind of didn't even hardly want to say her name to me, It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And so I just, oh, thanks. And I just walked away and went to somebody else. And of those 250 people, who do you think is the one that called me to hire me for a gig?
Her.
Donna. and she hired me for something in Hyannisport, the Fagawi Ball. Big deal. And they had a little cabaret room they wanted to set up, and they hired a few different people. And she's like, "Oh, well, let's try this guy. You know, he does drag." So it's a couple stand-up comics and me. Yeah. And then I said to her when she was hiring me, I said, "Can I get to P-Town? How far is that from P-Town?" She goes, "Oh, it's just a bus right away. I'll drop you off at the bus station." So Miss Ritchfield literally came to P-Town on the bus the first time, which is so perfect.
Yeah.
So I got dropped off on, so Sunday morning, because the event was Saturday. No, this is a week before Memorial Day, the weekend before Memorial Day. So you could have shot a cannon off in town and not hit anybody on the street. The season really starts on Memorial Day, especially Sunday afternoon, because all the weekend people leave to go back. So Sunday afternoon, I get dropped off. I stay at the Moffat House for $35 a night. That was, you know, back in the day. And it's 2002. And, you know, when I make my way, I think, okay, I'm just going to get dressed. I'm going to go to this tea dance at the Crown, because I walked through town to see what was going on. And that's how I got the gig to come back, is I did that. I did Showgirls, and I won $300, which was like $300,000 to me at the time, because I was so broke. And that's how I got in. So fast forward to that next summer where I got the contract. I get to town, and again, it was a hand of God moment, because Tropical Joe's had closed. Town Hall was essentially condemned. There was nothing going on there. There was no theater. There was no art house. There was no Red Room. It was just essentially the Pilgrim House wasn't doing shows, and the only two places doing shows was the Crown and the Post Office Cafe. Those were the only two places. So there's only like 6 shows a night at the most. So I could clean up. I was the only new act in town, and, you know, I worked hard. I mean, I advertised. I got out on the street and really advertised myself, but it was a lot easier. Now, there's as many as 18 shows a night. So that's how much it's grown.
You have a lot of competition.
It would be a much different experience coming to town now as a new person than it was then.
So
I mean, I really had it easy.
Is that the summer that you just... Your whole source of income is Miss Ritchfield.
Yep, and that's what happened. I came to town. My transmission went out on my car in Chicago. I mean, it was just like, ugh.
You were like, still like,
no money. I had no money, and everything. My credit cards were maxed out. I was probably like $20,000 in debt.
Gosh.
I was just like, I just said, okay, if this doesn't work, I've got to go back to PR and marketing, which I would have enjoyed. You know, I would have loved that. And it happened. It worked out, and I went home. I went home with enough money to pay that $20,000 off and have money. And I thought, I'm hanging on to this, and I got a contract for the next year. And then the next year, and you know, once you're here for a few years and you prove yourself, you can stay. You can stay.
But are you a life year-round resident here?
No,
Where do you live?
Well, now I live in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware.
Oh, okay.
But I just moved during the pandemic to be with my partner. When my mom died.
Rehoboth Beach is nice, I hear, right?
Really nice.
That's a gay area too,
beautiful.
Right?
Yep, very gay. More of a suburban feel to it because it's on the shoreline. So they had a lot of farmland and stuff that's all been turned into housing projects and stuff and developments.
So Rehoboth Beach during the year. But you don't have. Do you do any work during the year, or do you make all your money in your 4 months?
No, I travel all year.
Oh, as Miss Ritchfield.
Yeah.
But you're not writing columns or anymore. You're doing cruises.
Yeah. So I work with Atlantis events still. I'm 25 years into that.
Wow.
This is my 22nd season here. And I'm just
You do
finishing.
Travelocity commercials?
I used to do Orbitz commercials.
Orbitz. Yeah.
And Orbitz unfortunately got bought out, and we survived the first 2 buyouts.
Oh.
And then the third buyout, we lost it. I was shocked we made it. So, every time they got bought out, I was like, oh, this is it. We're done. We're done.
You're doing cruises? What else? During the year?
During the year. So like this fall, I do a show in Milton, Delaware, which is close to, but this is cute historic theater, but it's close to home. But I do that, and then I go to New York in October. I do a cruise in October. Then I do, I'm trying to think of where else I'm going so far this year. And I do Minneapolis for the whole month of December.
Oh, nice.
So I go back and do my holiday show there for like 3 weekends. So I'm there almost 4 weeks. So that's really nice. At a cute little theater in the South Minneapolis, the Illusion Theater. And that's another theater I've worked with for 25 years.
Right. So now you're on autopilot almost.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's great. And so I do that. And then I still work with Atlantis events January and February and March. So I'll do like a couple cruises and then try to not do a lot in those 3 months so I can write my new show. So
and you have a writer that helps you?
No.
Just
I
you?
just do it myself.
Have you ever thought about having someone help you?
Yeah, I do.
Some of the best comics have writers.
They all do.
Yeah.
And I just cannot do it. First, two problems I have. One is I'm too disorganized.
Okay.
And then the other problem I have, which is really unfortunate, is I just haven't found anybody that really has her voice. And so I've worked with directors, and actually some really good directors who I'm still friends with.
Like, who's that guy, Bruce Levan? The guy with the crazy hair.
Well, there's a guy
What's his name? Bruce Levan?
Oh, Bruce, yeah.
Bruce
that guy? Yeah,
Isn't
Bruce.
he like
I know him.
Is he a crazy, one of the best
totally
writers?
Nice. He's totally
like,
nice guy.
But he's dirty, right?
Right, exactly. And he's a super nice guy.
Yeah.
He knows Miss Ritchfield, yeah. But he's super, super nice. And I've had a number of great people. And I worked with Alex Timbers, who's like now in New York, like a huge name, and other people who've just been amazing. The only problem with it is they're theater directors. And so they tend to want to like have the character learn a lesson or whatever, and it's sort of like, she can't really learn a lesson, I mean, she can get close, but then at the end she's got to get it wrong, it's like almost there, but then it got to be
apart.
It falls apart at the end.
And every year it changes, your show changes, right?
It does. And if you come to the show enough, you'll hear some of the same jokes, or some of the quips about people that I have that I like, especially if I'm stuck, but I've learned to really understand audiences through working and also listening to other comics, and I always tell this story too, which I think important, is that I would get really frustrated with people who wouldn't work with me, right? You're talking to somebody and they kind of won't work with you.
Like, come on, man, give in.
And then one day, and it was back when, and I don't know why I should look this up, when David Letterman retired, whatever year that was, and it was a big deal, right? And there was, he had all sorts of guests on and so forth. Well, Jane Pauley was one of the guests that came to say goodbye to him on one of the shows, and she apologized to him. She goes, "I have to apologize to you," and he said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I screwed up a bit that you did." She's like, you were, and they showed the clip, and they were sucking helium. He and Paul Schaefer and somebody else, and then they wanted her to do it, and she didn't want to do it, and was firm about it. He asked her like a second time, and she's like, and she said, "I look back on that and I regret doing that because I was taking myself way too seriously. I was on a funny show. I should have just been funny." And he said, which I thought was really nice of her to, to come to terms with, but he said something that was so powerful to me, is he said, "You have nothing to apologize for. You were just reacting like anybody else would react." He goes, "You're a normal person. A comedian's not. The comedian's crazy, goofy, do anything for a laugh. You were just hired, or you were just asked to be on the show, to be yourself.
You're a guest.
Yeah, and if you wouldn't do something like that," he goes, "that's perfectly normal." And I remember thinking, it was just like a revelation to me, like, so now is a completely different. Meet people where they are, and if somebody doesn't want to participate, or they goof it up, or they say something.
But sometimes you'll get somebody, and you're like, I got one on the line, because you know that the person's cool and will do whatever. Yeah.
And then and it's the best when people just are honest with you, and say their real name and where they're really from and what they really do for work. That's, you're a divorce attorney.
Yeah.
And so some people will like try to change it up and sell insurance or something, or some funny thing.
Yeah, but then you tweak it and
and then sometimes you just have to let them go, because it's like, they're not giving you material to work with. I mean, they're trying to be the comedian, and in some cases it's just nerves. Somebody's nervous, and they're up in front of people, and I'll say something funny, and it's really rarely ever works.
So is the rule that when somebody's in drag, you address them as a female? Is that the rule?
Most of us don't really care. Do it for a living.
It's so funny, because when I had asked, I asked my friend Dave, I said, I want to reach out to, I knew your name was Russ.
Yeah.
I said, I want to reach out to him, like, how do I address him? I want it to be proper. And he's like, and Dave's a gay man. He was the town manager here. And he says to me, he says, I've never really, that's a fourth wall. I don't know the rules.
Right.
I wrote to all my gay friends, they're like, we don't know. So I just said, I wrote Russ/MR 1981. I'm like, I don't know what the rules are.
Hey, you guys.
But but how do you so do you know any straight drag queens?
No, not offhand, other than Barry Humphries was.
Barry Humphries?
Yeah, with Dame Edna.
Why do you think it's predominantly a gay forum?
Years ago it wasn't so much. Years ago it was, and years ago that a lot of them would be, like, I would be Mr. Russ. because you had to have a Mr. in front of your name when you did drag, and in many cases they were gay men. They were thespians.
Right.
They were and there's actually an interesting story about a guy who created this baby girl and was super famous in like the 20s, and his wife made all his costumes. He was a truck driver.
Well, that's
of
what
all
you'd always
things.
hear about a guy that like would dress in women's clothes or women's underwear. Like you'd hear about like, my friend's dad, like we found underwear and he's wearing women's underwear.
Which is a sexual
thing. Was that called transvestite or something?
Well, yeah, and sometimes that can be a sexual thing.
Right,
that can
right,
be
a
like a
kink.
sexual turn on, a kink.
Yeah,
Right. Like somebody who wears leather. Well,
But this is acting.
Yeah, this is different. This is like
comedy meets acting, right? Was that what you'd classify
So this
this?
is just most of us.
One of the things I have to ask you about is because I have a friend who's a very conservative guy, and he always talks about like he's gone down this fucking MAGA rabbit hole and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But he talks about like there's all this stuff, and you see it, I'm sure, like because I think you did it in your show last year about these maniacs that like think that you're after the kids and all this shit. Like I could bring my kids to this stuff. Like it couldn't be further from the truth. Where does it come from? You know the whole community probably, right?
Oh yeah.
Like who's after kid? No one.
No one. Yeah. And
you don't want anything. You guys. And mostly, I would say that most of my gay friends are like, yeah, hi, nice kid, and like my kids' godparents are gay. They're like, they spend the day with them. They're like, see you later.
Yeah.
They're not looking for anything other than spend a fun day.
And you look at people who I look at Billie Jean King, and she had divorced her husband, and she came out, and so forth. Well, she and her wife are godparents to her former husband's kids. I mean, that's what I look at as
they think,
beautiful.
Why are you reading these books? They go crazy on that.
Most gay people love kids, and want to protect kids.
But where did that come from?
I think it comes from it's an easy target. It's like who doesn't want to protect kids? We all want to protect kids. Kids are vulnerable, and so if you can turn something around to say you're hurting kids, it's a horrible thing, right? It's a terrible thing.
They go nuts about the story time.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It goes crazy. And I'm like, what's the big deal? It's acting.
Because they see it as quote unquote grooming children.
Grooming. But how is it grooming? What are you grooming them for? For what? Acting?
Yeah. Well,
comedy?
I always say, what are you grooming them for? To be nice? And to be accepting, to understand the world, and to be able to accept other people's lifestyles.
I just don't understand it.
And so, for whatever reason, Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these people, and they call everybody pedophiles. That's their big thing. And it's such a disservice to everybody. It's a disservice to the people that are really trying to stop pedophilia, because it's not pedophilia. It's just people who love kids and want to reach out to kids.
But that was always a thing where people would.
That's what they used to say about gay men.
Like you keep them away from your kids. Like you're like, what are you talking about?
That's why for years the gay people couldn't teach school. Gay men particularly couldn't teach school because they're pedophiles. And it wasn't until years later that they were able to show there's no more percentage of pedophilia amongst straight men as gay men. It's
it's a sickness, and it runs throughout the population equally.
Yep. And so, but I think it's just an easy thing for them it's an easy target. And the same thing with, I heard a woman say, I'm a MAGA supporter. She's like, and, I'm not into this woke business, and there's only, there doesn't need to be a bathroom for everyone. There can be 2 bathrooms for men and women, that's it. And the reality is, for the most part, bathrooms aren't even an issue. You know what I mean?
It never comes up.
It never comes up.
Going to pee or poop
there's
is
some,
a big deal.
There's most places now, a lot of restaurants just have general bathrooms with doors on them, and you all wash your hands in the same place, and you just,
do your business.
You do your business, and it's like, and for the most part, it's men and women's bathrooms. It's just not even an issue. And so what they want to do, though, it's an easy thing to get people riled up. It's an easy thing to think, well, I want to protect kids.
Well, they always say,
these people
there's
are
a guy
bad
with a penis in there. My daughter's going to see it. It's like, listen, I have a daughter, and there comes an age where I can't let her go in the bathroom. Now what I usually do is, because she's old enough, I find a nice mom, and I'm like, hey, could you take her in? But before, I'd have to take her into the men's room. And, at a baseball game, everyone's lined up at those troughs. I mean, what am I going to do?
What are you going to do?
Everyone's out there hanging brain, I don't want her to see that, but nobody's trying to hurt her. It's just I just sort of guide her head and I put her in the stall and set her on the tall thing.
And go to the bathroom and be done and get out and watch the game.
A few more questions. How long does it take you to get into character?
Like about an hour.
An hour.
Yeah.
And you do it all yourself now?
Yeah. I've always done it by myself. I only had somebody help me twice. And then this this drag queen who allowed me to be at this fundraiser the first time I was a professional, who actually was in a show. He said to me, I'll show you how to do your makeup. he didn't have a car, and he goes, if you'll take me to Nordstrom's at the Mall of America, he goes, I need to pick some stuff up that I ordered, and he goes, and I'll help you buy makeup, and I'll show you one time how to do your makeup and take pictures. Bring a camera so we can take pictures. And so he's the one that taught me how to do my makeup, and that's how he taught me. Because I gave him a ride. I had a car, and so I gave him a ride to the store, and then we bought this is the makeup you buy. Bought the makeup.
And you still use the same makeup?
Pretty much. I don't really do what he did because I'm a little bit colorblind, and so all the contouring that makes your face look fantastic, I can't do because I can't see color well enough.
Right.
So I don't do that.
What about what do they call it? The tucking and all that? Like,
and I don't do that either. I just stick it between my legs and pull my underwear up. Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, the people that are like, I mean, they do what they call a deep tuck. My friend told me to ask about that.
Yeah.
But that's like
that's not me.
Yeah, that's hard to do, right? You gotta
I just stick it between my legs and pull I have men's underwear. I just pull up.
Pull it up and hope for the best.
And then I pull up tights.
Yeah.
And then I pull up like a onesie.
Right.
And the onesie keeps me together. And I don't wear anything that
you're gonna have a
that
problem.
Revealing, I mean, and generally if you do look carefully, it's like I don't really look like a woman, like because I don't wear hips and I don't wear boobs, so it's like and you talk about the problem with you're talking about libraries and reading and stuff like that. I did have a bad experience. I think I talked about it in a show.
Yeah,
I
lady
talked
went
about it.
like wild on you.
Yeah, she went wild on and just like printed lies, and that's the thing that I find the most discouraging is how the Christian community comes out and it's just like they did this article that was filled with lies and kind of half-truths, kind of a situation like, I have been on stage with gay men who are modestly attired, but that was a gay cruise. It's a different
for adults.
It's for adults. I don't do that. I can be when I go with kids, I wear a dress that's longer. I wear, what I mean? I just make a point of being more modest, because I don't want, and other queens too, they wear pants instead of a dress to be more modest, slacks.
But your show here in town is kid-friendly.
Totally kid-friendly.
Yeah, we're going tonight. It's because my kids have always asked about
Love
you.
it.
And
have they ever seen it?
Well, no, because last year, and, my son who's done 85 shows. He's like, I've gone to Rent. He goes, Dear Evan Hansen. He's like, why can't I go to this? How many in Les Mis, how many people killed themselves? He's like, how bad could it be? So I went last year and I said, oh my God, this is totally good for you. You'd love it.
Yeah,
and
kids
can come do it. And so this year they're like, you're having him on your podcast. We are coming tonight. We have to go. They're so excited. So they haven't seen it. But so people should know that this is a kid-friendly show, and any of the malapropisms or double entendre they won't even understand.
And if they do,
then I'll explain it to them.
Yeah. Or if they ask about it, you can explain it.
Because it's just like in our house, we swear, and our kids never swear outside of the home. But in normal conversation, I say fuck, I say shit. It's expressive language. And when you probably grew up, they wash your mouth out with soap.
Oh my God,
and that's insane to me because it's language.
Right.
I'm on the phone with like the highest caliber lawyers, and we're like, this fucking guy's driving me crazy. That's how we talk. They hear me in the car, so what? Am I going to tell them they can't talk like that?
Yeah.
That's how you talk, and they have to know they've never used it outside of the home.
Yeah.
So everything has to have a place, and so they understand that people dress up.
A big piece
and
of
comedy
it is just, knowing when to be funny and when not to be funny.
So when do you get into drag today? Like your show's at 9.
I start about 5, and even though the show's at 9, I start about 5, sort of getting ready and taking a shower and shaving and putting makeup on. Then I can eat. So
I eat while you're in character?
Yeah, so I get almost ready, and then I have, because I can't, because I have to leave the house usually the house between 7 and 7:30, so I can get out on the street, drive around a little bit, and advertise the show. And so what I have to do is eat as late as I can eat, because by the time 9 o'clock comes, if I've eaten at 5, I'm going to be starving at 9. So I try to eat at like between 6:30 and 7.
Okay.
And then put my lips on and then get out of the house fast.
And then you hop on and you start advertising.
Then I start advertising. Usually from 7:15, 7:30, I'm driving around until like 8:30.
Okay.
And then I usually go to the theater and get my stuff ready.
And then the show's about an hour and...
Well, it's supposed to be an hour-long show, and it's never an hour long.
And then you take pictures with everyone.
And I take pictures with everybody. I try.
No, it's great.
What I try to do is try to get it into an hour 5, hour 10, and lately it's just been way too long. So I mean, like tonight, I'm going to make an effort.
To an hour?
I trying to like rewrite the beginning of it to get into it faster, because it's just fun to talk to people, and and if you're in the zone and people are laughing, you're having a good time. But like an hour 20 is just long.
Oh, that's long.
It's a long time. And I mean, I'm okay with it.
Do you ever do a double?
No, not anymore.
Like in Broadway, you know, they do that 1 o'clock and the 6 o'clock.
I used to do 2 shows a night. Very, you know, like if I was on the road someplace, and some theaters only have one night for you, so you'll do a 7 and a 9, and I hate that. I do it on the ships sometimes because you have to do 2 a night, and it's terrible because you tech the show the afternoon, and then which is like an hour or 2. Then you know, have dinner, get ready, and then you do a show. Then you have an hour, then you do. I mean, by that second show, I'm shot, you know.
So 1, and then you're done, and then you go home, get undressed, you go right to bed, or are you all charged
I usually
up?
gotta go out. I hang out at, if you ever want to see me, at Essentials,
Yes.
which is a convenience store on the east side of town.
There?
I hang out there, yeah. And sometimes we bring our ukuleles and we play the ukulele, or we just sit and visit with people, and, you know, have a hot dog or a bag of chips or something, and, you know, relax, have my fizzy water. I don't drink.
As Russ?
No, in drag.
Oh, you stay in drag?
Because I get ready at home, and then I leave from home. So
no, but I'm saying, but when you have the hot dog, that's after the show.
Yeah, it's after the show, and it's when I'm, you know, just relaxing winding down, and
then when you come home,
you know,
how long does it take you to get out of your stuff?
Like, I just jump in the shower. I mean, I do take the face off and jump in the shower, and I'm done in like 15 minutes. Yeah, it doesn't take long. But getting ready takes a while. You know, that takes.
Well, this is well. First of all, I got to thank you again. Thank you for doing
this.
This
Has been great.
This is great. I've never been able to find much about you, like interviewing online. I mean, there's some stories, but I really wanted to know about you, how this came to be, and how you do this. And again, this is you're really fantastic. You have a great show, and you bring a lot of joy to me, my family,
thank you.
and I look forward to seeing you tonight. But thank you again, and this has been wonderful. So
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.